Hello, hi, and welcome to another episode of The Emma Gunn Show. I am your host, Emma Gunn and I thought we would talk about something in this episode that we actually discussed, and I'd like to think that we were ahead of our time when we first spoke about this, because it's about biohacking. And I went back through my notes, I went back through all of my research, and I noticed that 5 years ago, we were talking at length about biohacking, and that was for a few reasons. It was because I was trying at the time to get Wim Hof on the podcast, and I was really fascinated by the positive impact of cold water exposure or just general cold exposure. I was also rather taken by all of these things that I was hearing via podcasts like Tim Ferriss and Joe Rogan about things like bulletproof coffee or intermittent fasting. Or particularly in the case of Tim Ferriss, I was really taken by this idea of the slow carb diet, and this idea that before you eat, if you did like a load of air squats, you could stimulate a process in the body that would mean that you would metabolize your food in a certain way, which would be in the long term help you with weight management. There were so many things that I felt like they were just kind of coming onto the horizon as like, oh, these are some interesting new things. It really very much felt like biohacking was still very much on the tip of the tongue of the wellness industry. And I do think there's a big difference between the wellness industry and what I'm talking about, like those kind of early adopters or those people who are slightly off from the mainstream, who are looking at the less obvious route to feeling good. And it was definitely not new, but there was definitely a shift back then about how biohacking was being embraced. And I very much felt it at the time. Back in 2019, it's why I was talking about it, because let's face it, I'm pretty mainstream myself. It very much felt like it was on the brink of going mainstream, and it was exciting. I don't know if you found it exciting, but at the time I found it exciting that I was talking about it, because it's quite nice to feel as though you are at the beginning of a conversation as opposed to coming in halfway through or indeed at the end. And sure enough, I think you can see from the way foods are marketed. I mean, you go into any supermarket now, particularly here in the UK, and protein is written on everything, because we are now very much in that. And again, it's from the biohacking. It's like, oh, protein's really good for you. Protein, you feel full on protein. It's good if you want to work out. It'll help you get results. Protein has just become, it is good for all of those things, but there's sort of a buzzword element to it. That means that we're prioritizing protein, and it's kind of been put on this pedestal as like, protein's the best macro, bro. And it is a great macro, but I think we just it just goes to show how mainstream that way of thinking, which back in 2019 was still very much on the fringe, has become. And I think what's interesting as well is, like, if you look at the way supplements are marketed or talked about, or the way people talk about fitness now, gone are the days of talking about Zumba and, hey, go and have fun when you exercise. Now it's, here's how to get results. Here's how to maximize your gym efforts. Here's how to support your gym efforts in the kitchen, all of those sorts of things. So I think that the landscape has changed, and it's now focused on types of exercise and methodologies for health and fitness that we're now considering as part of our everyday health choices. They wouldn't have been the way our brains might have worked 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years ago, but they very much are now. And the thing is that what it shows me is that I think we all actually instinctively biohack. We just don't always realize that that's what we're doing. And we'll come on to that in a second, because I don't think it's a bad thing that biohacking has gone mainstream. I think there's something really wonderful about saying to people, hey, you have agency in how you feel. Like, there are some tweaks that you can make that might actually make you feel better. But then again, the actual art of, or the science, I should say, of biohacking is quite complex. It's multi-layered. And as much as it feels great to be making choices that you hope will make you feel good and well in the short, medium and long term, I think we can all agree, or I would certainly make the point, and you are free to agree with me or disagree with me, that the space has been infiltrated by people making claims that imply good health, or who, when there isn't as much good health as they may want you to believe, and who just add confusion to the topic. So again, the term biohacking is absolutely nothing new. It was nothing new when I first started talking about it, and is certainly not new now, and it has almost to a point been overused. But It's an approach to scientific learning that involves building and changing things quickly and monitoring what happens. So I mentioned Bulletproof Coffee a minute ago. So Bulletproof Coffee, again, I think it's kind of had its moment and now it's on the wane, but there we go. But Dave Asprey, who was the founder of Bulletproof, refers to biohacking as something called systems thinking. So it's a systems thinking approach to our own biology. And what that means in this context is that it's looking at your wellness and how you feel as a series of inputs and outputs. So, for example, if you see food and exercise as inputs and energy levels and your mood and your stamina as outputs, then biohacking is the practice of tweaking your inputs, the food you eat and the exercise that you do and the lifestyle choices that you decide on. It's about tweaking those to create an immediate and measurable change in your output. So how you feel, how much energy you have, your mood, your quality of sleep, your focus, all of those things. And I think we can all agree that, I keep saying that, but maybe we don't. But I think definitely as somebody in the beauty and health space, I have been talking for a very long time about things like overwhelm, fatigue, stress, all of these things. And we've come up time and time again with these sort of trends of things that we think, not just that we think that they may help with those things, but that they become, there's a fashionable trend in how we can make those things help. So 5 years ago when I first spoke about biohacking, and I mentioned Dave Asprey from Bulletproof Nutrition a minute ago. So the Bulletproof Coffee, I think, is a really good way of describing exactly what I'm trying to get at, which is that this is the peak of biohacking. Coffee is one of the world's most popular drinks. So as much as it might have worked, it's also a brilliant money-making commercial enterprise to make a tweak to something that the majority of people, certainly in the Western world, either pour themselves or buy within an hour of waking up. That is a genius business strategy. And I think if we could all identify something that many people do, enjoy, like, consider a non-negotiable, and if we could somehow piggyback on to top of that, we all would. But anyway, so if you're not aware, the Bulletproof coffee is a coffee you drink in the morning, and you add MCT oil, which is basically a good fat, and butter or ghee. Now, you have it instead of breakfast, but the logic is that the combination of those things, the coffee, the MCT oil, and the butter, will suppress your hunger and slow down the absorption of the caffeine. So you have a slow release energy surge from having had that coffee. And the MCT oil also benefits mental clarity. So you have it instead of breakfast because the oil and fat make it really quite calorific. But again, the purpose is to boost mental clarity, keep you satiated, and keep your energy level steady for a prolonged period so you don't get those dips. So that, very simply put, is a form of biohacking. Whether or not you want to put butter and fat into your coffee is completely up to you, and it's a completely different matter. But Bulletproof coffee is just one thing. And as I said, I think that was quite big a few years ago. I also was somebody who bought mushroom coffee. I remember when I was probably around the time I first started talking about this on the podcast, I was probably drinking, was it Lion's Mane or something? Anyway, I know Alice Hart-Davis and I talked about it at length one time. I was drinking mushroom coffee, again, supposed to much less caffeine, but great slow release energy, was meant to make you feel mentally clear. So there was Bulletproof, there was a mushroom coffee, there's also cryotherapy, which was a huge favourite among biohackers for using sustained periods in sub-zero temperatures to reduce inflammation and relieve pain. Then there are also things like EMS training, which use low-frequency electrical impulses to stimulate muscles during a workout to maximise the impact of training and cut down your training time. And then there are things like adaptogens. So there just seemed to be this real swell of all of these things that you could tag onto something that you were already doing, with the exception of cryotherapy, which is why I think that one probably has become less popular as quickly as it has. But EMS training, you just do your workout, but you're plugged into these machines. It's not, you can't walk around the gym. You're plugged into these machines. But it was like, well, how can I don't know, I can do 20 reps, but I'll get the benefits of 100, that kind of thing. So adaptogens also are quite interesting, and I think these are ones that have really taken off, and we've seen absolutely go wild in the supplementation industry. These are supplements that strengthen the adrenal system and moderate our stress responses. So our stress response is designed to come on when there's an emergency, and it's a very primitive system. So it was designed and formulated and, programmed many, many generations ago, when our triggers and our stress, things that we would get stressed about, were probably life-threatening. And now we have changed, and our stress, all of the same system is now triggered by emails from your boss, emails from your friend who's a pain in the bum, all of those sorts of things, or brown envelopes from HMRC. So there's a feeling, and I think, again, lots of us can identify with it. There's this constant feeling of our bodies being pumped full of the stress hormones, cortisol and adrenaline. And it's led to a culture where we feel constantly stress wired, overwhelmed. And adaptogens can be a way to biohack the way your body responds to those things, so you don't reach that tipping point where you think, I just need everybody to leave me alone. Like, I've had that recently where I just had a day where I was trying to work from home. I had a lot to do, and the doorbell kept going. And the doorbell, because I live in a building, it's one of those entry phone systems, and I wish there was a variety. I wish that it would do, like, sheep buying and birds chirping, but it's just a really aggressive siren every single time. And every time it went off, I actually jumped out of my skin, and I thought, okay, you need to somehow chill the heck out, because that is a sign that you are on the edge. Anyway, the thing with biohacking, I think, is that it has become really specific. And the wellness industry has embraced the term and the tactics in a way that I think is just completely unavoidable. It's used in the same sentences as peak performance and maximize output and 10x your output. And I think, as with anything, particularly when it is about being better, more, it is that I think there's something elitist about it. I think there's something about, this is for people who can afford it, as opposed to, well, this is something everyone can do. Because the truth is, I think that actually we're all capable of biohacking without having to spend a lot of money to do it. So here's the thing. While it might seem complicated, inaccessible and expensive, I think that something really simple like dieting is a biohack. So you reduce your calorie intake, your calorie input, to affect your weight, for example. Or even when you're hungover, you might crave junk food. That's your body sort of pushing you towards a biohack, because it's like, I feel terrible, I want to soak up what's in my gut, and I need fast available energy, and fast processed food will just burn like a piece of paper on a fire. And it's like, yeah, give me that, because that'll make me feel really good quickly. You know that actually what will make you feel really good is a massive salad with loads of protein, but nobody wants that when they're hungover. You want something with a muck in it, or I do. Something that is so familiar and comforting and salty, all of those things. Anyway, so I think those are all types of biohacking, but no one is going to say, hey, having a fast food meal when you're hungover is a biohack, because that somehow makes it a little less sexy and a little bit less desirable. But the truth is, what I'm trying to say here is that the truth is, you have probably biohacked before. You just didn't give it a name, and you didn't know that's exactly what you were doing. Even if it was that you got to the end of your working day and your colleagues leaned over and said, hey, we're going to the pub later. And you just instinctively knew, no, I need to go home. I'm really tired. I've had a tough day. I need to unwind. That, in a weird way, is a biohack, because you're saying, my body, my mind, I can't do that tonight. I need to recoup. I need to regenerate. I need to give myself a bit of a break. Maybe like me, I need to sit in my bedroom with the lights on very low, watching reality TV, potentially even an episode of reality TV that I've already watched. But you know what I mean? I just kind of feel like those are all being in tune with your body in order to give it what it needs at a time when it is needing something. I think that's what biohacking is. And I think that we're all doing it. But as I said, I think it is a fancy term that has started to come to be some sort of cure-all. And that's where I think it can get dangerous. I mean, I know bulletproof coffee. I haven't spoken to anyone recently who's drinking any kind of coffee with butter in. But the point being that biohacking your morning coffee won't be a magic bullet to feeling more energetic, feeling mental clarity, having that slow release all of the time. It won't suddenly make you feel good 24 hours a day if for the rest of the time you're sedentary, you love an afternoon donut, so you get a nice sugar fix in the afternoon, and you pound 2 large glasses of Chablis every evening. No judgment, by the way. I'm just saying that it's a little bit like me back in the day, eating a Weight Watchers can of soup for lunch, but then having a bit of a binge in the evening and wondering why I wasn't losing weight. The two just don't go together. So another one that I think is really interesting, and I still talk about with such reverence and think it can be so good if it's the right thing for you, which you have to gauge by kind of experimenting, is intermittent fasting. That's a biohack. That's where you only eat during a specific feeding window. So in my case, I used to choose 8 hours. So I would choose from 12 o'clock in the afternoon until 8 o'clock in the afternoon. That's a form of biohacking, because for the rest of the day, between 8 p.m. in the evening and 12 o'clock the next day, I wouldn't eat. And that would give my body enough time to digest. It would encourage autophagy, which happens anyway, but it encourages autophagy, where you kind of, the body can clean house basically. That to me is a really simple biohack. And of course, there's wearing an Apple Watch or a Fitbit or an activity tracker. And that in itself is a biohack, because it collects data that you can then use to your advantage. So that to me is, again, really simple. You don't really need to buy into anybody else to do it. You obviously need the activity tracker. But these are all ways in which we're paying attention to how we feel. And sometimes I think that the wellness industry grabs hold of something in a trend, and it takes your eye off the ball, and you start thinking, what do they say I should be doing? When actually you should be listening to yourself. So, for example, just before I recorded this episode, I thought I'm going to take a look around and see what I have today that I didn't have 5 years ago, that I wouldn't be without. And let's see if any of them are related in any way to biohacking in the way that I have them specifically so that I feel good. So yes, I have the Apple Watch. I've had that for a long time. I can't say that's new. I use it to track my steps and my workouts. I also recently, inspired by my friend Sam Chapman, bought something called a snooze band. I think I've mentioned it before on here, but I have it in my bedside table. And I'm really bad for waking up in the middle of the night and then not being able to get back to sleep. And I have got the snooze band. And what happens if I wake up in the middle of the night, I will put that on. So it's basically like a fabric headband, covers your eyes. It's got very flat earphones in the side. And it's got a little control panel on the front, and you can Bluetooth it to your phone, and I can get it to play white noise. I can get it to do binaural beats. I can get it to play a podcast, and I can set it to go off in an hour. And that usually lulls me back to sleep, which is really nice. I have found that, because I'm very aware that if you wake up in the middle of the night, I heard this years ago, if you spend any amount of time over like 5 or 10 minutes awake in the middle of the night, it's like being a shift worker. And actually shift work, particularly shift work involving periods of working through the night, is really not bad in the long term for your health. It's really not good, for your long-term health. So I'm using those so that my sleep is disrupted as little as possible, so that I don't end up sleeping in a way that is actually not doing me any good. Then I've got the vitamin patches from the WhatsApp company that I select daily depending on whether I need energy, whether I feel like I need a bit of calm, or whether I need to sort of detox a little bit. I actually think that's quite a nice thing to be able to do. So today I'm wearing one that allows me to feel a little bit more energized because it's a Monday, and I have got absolutely tons to do today. I had a much busier weekend than I was anticipating. So I just wanted to wear something that I knew was going to it's a little sticker. I put it on my wrist, and I could be very tempted to not do stuff today, but I need to do it. So every time I've got these energizing vitamins that are being absorbed into my system, but at the same time, every time I see that sticker, I'm like, yep, come on, get on it, get on the case, girl. I also take electrolytes from Will Powders every single morning. That's become a non-negotiable of my morning routine, simply because I have never been the sort of person who drinks enough water. And this makes me, for the first time ever, drink a pint within minutes of waking up. And I feel better for it. Now, with all of that said, I spoke to a nutritionist recently, Rob Hobson, who came on their podcast, who said that a pinch of salt in a glass of water will do the exact same job. Yet I'm now subscribed to Will Powders and pay, £30 a month for cherry-flavoured electrolytes. I don't need to do that. I know I don't need to do that. But at the moment, I'm kind of going to go with it. But I can cancel that subscription at any time. But you see what I mean? I could very easily have just been adding salt to my water for years. But it's the fact that I've got a cherry flavoured sachet that I can carry around with me, that I can have it at home. If I if I want to take it out with me, I can take it out when I'm at meetings. I can just I'm just going to put my electrolytes in my water. It just makes me feel, and it makes me feel a lot better, I have to say. And it's because I'm drinking more water. But again, the first thing, if anyone says, you need to drink more water, and you go, how? We'll drink more water. But I don't need the electrolytes. I do think that they are doing some quite good things. I do feel good for them. But at the same time, I could probably use a pinch of salt and that would be fine. But hey, I also meditate every day, which is a biohack, because it's proven to reduce blood pressure and help manage stress. I strength train at least 3 times a week to increase my lean muscle mass, which I hope will do a couple of things. A, make me stronger. A, make me metabolically more efficient. And also, hopefully, help me navigate something like the menopause with far greater ease. I also walk. I like to get fresh air. I know it reduces my stress levels. And it also means that I'm not going from working out quite hard to then sitting at my desk all the time. If I'm walking, it means that I'm also getting steps in and things like that, which make me feel really, really good. And I don't want to go to the 2 extremes of intense strength training session to sitting at my desk for hours, editing, filming, recording, because it's just 2 extremes. I like to have the walking in there so that there's something in the middle. So that's all kind of biohacking. And the first thing I've observed, though, in, I would say, the last couple of years, is that with biohacking, there used to be an element of discomfort. It was this idea that you can do something short and sweet that will give you long-term results. And I think that we were all like, you know what, the juice might be worth the squeeze. I only have to do 5 minutes of that. I only have to do that once, or any of those things. Like, there was always a little sort of, you kind of knew it perhaps wasn't going to be the most pleasant thing, but you were willing to do it because the results were worth it. And I think that's why cryotherapy was huge for a while, because cryotherapy, if you've ever done it properly, it's chilly. Like, you have to actually, I mean, I know that there were loads of videos all over social media platforms of people in cryo booths, like dancing along. Oh my God, this is so exciting. But actually it can be quite uncomfortable, as it should be, because it's trying to elicit a physical response or physiological response. And I do know that in some quarters it's still quite popular, but the fact is, it is uncomfortable. Intermittent fasting too, which I used to hear about all the time. I have barely seen anything on intermittent fasting in the last 18 months. I've benefited from it hugely, but it's not easy. While your body is adjusting to feeling hungry, you can find it a real struggle to get onto that schedule. As I said, I used to do 16-8. Now I'm a little bit more flexible, but I always try and eat by 8 p.m. And then Sometimes I'll eat after a workout if it's quite hard, or sometimes I'll try and push through to 12, 1 o'clock. But when you are adjusting to that period where you're not snacking or doing this or doing that, it's hard. It is uncomfortable. It does not feel great. It takes a while to get on that schedule. You can't just go, I'm going to start intermittent fasting and sort of do it from day one. Or if you can, but just know it's going to fight you for it. You're going to have a little bit of a battle of wills with yourself to get onto that schedule. So all of this is to say that, having spoken about it 5-6 years ago on the podcast, and I know that we talked about it a lot back and forth on various episodes and with various guests, if I had to make any kind of observation about how the biohacking space has evolved since we first started talking about it, I would say it's actually become a little bit soft and easy. And worst of all, I think, it's removed our agency somewhat in our ability to help ourselves feel better. So if you're tired, the most obvious thing to do is to accommodate a change where you're able to sleep. So whether that's going to bed an hour earlier or getting up a little later, maybe saying no to social events for a week or so that you can kind of slow down a bit, and maybe you're like, you know what, for the next 2 weeks, I'm not going to go out. I'm not going to go out after work. I'm going to go home and I'm going to watch an episode of Reacher every night, or I'm going to watch an episode of something every night. Or I'm going to read a chapter in my book every night, something like that. That I think is really lovely. But now, with biohacking as kind of the emblem of doing something positive, it's almost like you need to do more. It's like, if you're feeling tired, why don't you take this new supplement? Or if you're feeling tired, why don't you try this relaxing sound bath? Or if you're feeling tired, why don't you subscribe to this something or other? Or why don't you go on this retreat? Or why don't you treat yourself? It's not a case of, why don't you just slow down and do a bit less? Which is which I think is something that can be applied to so many corners of our lives, where there's always someone or something trying to urge us towards doing more, buying more, adding something else. And I do think it's a little bit, I do think that adds to the sense of overwhelm. And I think my thing this year, after all of my efforts with Notion and thinking that by adding Notion to my life, I would be more efficient, I realized that by adding Notion to my life, I was more stressed. I have realized, or I think my pendulum has swung a little bit too far the other way, in that I'm now rejecting anything that tells me it's going to make me feel good. I'm like, no, I'll be the judge of that. Don't you tell me how I will or won't feel. And I just reject it. I've begun to find it quite patronizing, and I don't know if anyone else is on the same page as me there. But yeah, I just think that's always the way. As soon as something goes mainstream, it becomes an opportunity to monetize. And worse than that, it also becomes an opportunity for someone or people to put themselves in an elevated position where they're like, do what I'm doing. And actually, don't do what other people are doing, because that might not work for you. Test and trial things and see what works for you. If they want to share their lives and their hacks and their methodologies on social media, fine. But you don't have to. There are plenty of things that I do, that I don't talk about necessarily on the podcast or on my Instagram or any of those things, because I think actually that might not be particularly interesting for people. I'm always trying to find the thing that I think you will find some common ground or interest in. But I've said this many times, it's very easy. As soon as there's a trend, it's very easy to get sold to. And I'm very, very skeptical. I think probably a little bit too skeptical, but in that sense, I'm probably quite a good person to bounce ideas off, because when someone's saying we've got this new magic thing, my first thing is, no, you haven't. Okay, we'll prove it. And genuinely, I'm only saying this from someone who's in a position where I get a lot of emails about all sorts of health and beauty and things that would claim that they can make your life better. Whenever I go back and ask for supporting information, I would say that 90% can't come back with anything, which I just sort of proves my point, really. So there we go. That's what I want to talk about with biohacking today. I do think that there is value in biohacking. I really do. But I think ultimately, and I do think, I've mentioned will powders. Davinia Taylor's been on this podcast. I consider her a friend. I think I really like her. I think what she has done in terms of turning her life around is incredible. And in turning around how she is living and has felt is just so admirable. And she does put out some, what I think are really good products. I like her electrolytes, and I really like her L-theanine capsules. I think her protein powders are delicious as well. But she's a unicorn in that particular space. But she was earlier. She was talking about things way, way, way before anyone else was. And she's been able to really sort of, the proof has been in her putting in terms of, look, this is how I feel better. But then she goes away and she gets the research and she's like putting together products that do work. I do think they're legit. But anyway, I'm just sort of saying, you can definitely look at someone like Davinia, you can follow her example. But I do think with biohacking, to do it really well, it's a very simple process of saying, right, how do I feel? How do I feel today? Like if you're listening to this and maybe you don't feel great, just write it down on a piece of paper. How do I feel? ? Tired, overwhelmed, worn down, unloved. Like think about all of the things that might be feeling a bit rubbish. And then right next to it, how do I want to feel? And you can think about all of those things and you can write those down. And then all you need to do is figure out what you can do realistically to change one into the other. Like if you're feeling tired right now and you want to feel energized, what can you realistically change to feel that way? We've all got commitments. We all have demands on our time, both physically, mentally, emotionally, both virtually, in person, all of those things. But is there anything we can do to take ownership over a tiny part of our day that might help with the tiredness thing? Because it doesn't need to be a biohack. It just needs to be a look at, right, how do I feel now? What is my situation now? What would I like it to look like? How can I tweak that? And I think that's the best gift that you can give yourself, is being in tune with all of those things and being able to get a sense of what do you need. Because if we do delegate it too much to, I've got to go to that sound bath where it's all a bit performative, you're going to become a little bit numb to the signals your body's sending you, where it might be like, just please don't go out this weekend, just please have a weekend off, or just please don't drink. I'd really love it if you just didn't drink this weekend. You probably instinctively already know what the hack is, bio or otherwise, that you need to make yourself feel a little bit better. So pay attention to that, listen to that, because you don't have to buy that. That all comes from within you. And if it's a little bit different, then maybe you do need to go and speak to a GP, a doctor, somebody, and just say, do you know what? I have been feeling really crappy. I've tried these changes and nothing's really working. And then I think that's completely valid to have a conversation that is outside of you. But I just don't think that biohacking should be a quick fix, or it should be something that you have to buy into to get the results. It is something that you can very, very easily do and change. And I hope that this is helpful for anyone who is feeling a little bit tired. Or indeed, I had a message. The whole reason I wrote about this, I'm talking about this today, is because somebody messaged me on Instagram and asked me about biohacking. And I thought, oh gosh, that's right. I haven't spoken about biohacking for ages, because I did that all ages ago. But how funny that somebody is asking me what biohacking is now. Maybe there's going to be a surge in the trend. Who knows? But let me know if you have any thoughts about biohacking. Let me know if there's anything that you've done, because we all did if you've been here since 26 Habits, when that was a lot of biohacking. And I know that a lot of you joined me for that and really benefited from making some changes. So if there's anything you've done that you can say, you know what, Emma, that fundamentally changed something incredible for me, please do share it, whether it's underneath this YouTube video, whether it's on Spotify in the comments, whether it's DMing me on Instagram, whether it is, what else could it be? Whether it is Instagram, email officer@emmaguns.com. Then please do share your insights, because I would love to hear from you. Anyway, how funny. We talked about this such a long time ago, but I'm really glad that we revisited it. So let's catch up about this in comments and DMs and emails. I'd love to hear from you. Thank you so much for listening. I will see you on the next one.